Hi, I just wanted to share my experience working on my Bobcat 763. I have been struggling with replacing the bearings on this Bobcat. The seals have been leaking for a long time. I parked it here in the front yard and wanted to find some time to actually embark on this adventure. I'd never done it before, so I have used many people's videos online, and they have been very helpful, but I never really did find a video that really just stepped through the process. I went to the skid steer forum, saw a lot of emails back and forth describing how to do different things, but never really a step-by-step video. And after really getting a lot of help, though, from those forums and videos, I figured I owed something back and decided I'd show you how I'm doing the rear bearings. So far, I have completed the front bearings, and they're a little easier than the back bearings, as you have a little better access to the axle tube from the front. The rear axle tube is kind of buried behind the steering mechanism and a bunch of hydraulic hoses, and it's always a little scarier going back there if you don't know what you're doing. And so what I've done so far is I basically marked these rods showing where they need to be hooked up in the future when I connect these back together. These can spread apart pretty nicely, which allows you to get access to the sprocket. And the only problem I found was the wire harness. I had to cut some cable ties and remove those bolts from a little bracket there that held everything in place, and that gave me a little bit of space to work. And I could get, so one thing I found was important is you need some leverage to loosen up these sprocket bolts here, or axle bolts. And I just used this big old pipe that was from a trampoline that I have in the yard, and that worked fine, and I was able to get that in there over a 28 millimeter wrench, and it didn't take too much to loosen it up at this point. So then the next thing I did was, if you can imagine the sprocket put in its normal place, I loosened up the sprocket bolts on both, and I stuck a pry bar, a big breaker bar, in between the two, and just pushed, and it easily pressed out the shaft from the bearing, and I was able to remove the first axle from the shaft, and that's where I am right now. And I will come back later and show you the next steps. So this seal was leaking really bad, and even when I pulled the axle out, I just yanked the axle out with the hub, and it left the seal in place and the bearing in place, and the bearings weren't destroyed like they were on my front axle. But yeah, I had to pull the seal out. I just used this pry bar, and it has a handy little broken claw there, and I just put it in there and just cranked on the thing, and was able to pull the seal out, and then the bearing just came out, and sure enough, this bearing is really worn and doesn't move very smoothly. However, the inside bearing was fine. So the next step I'm going to do, after I'm going to clean this up, but I'm going to use a porta power to press out the other side. And I found the porta power is a fantastic little tool, and if you can buy it for, get one of those 20% off coupons from Harbor Freight, 80 bucks. I think it's about 80 bucks. It's I think a good tool to have around. You can do a lot of different things with it. The other tools I found were useful. I'm not completely happy that I ended up buying this, but these bearing, I don't know what they're called, puller tools or whatever, they do help, especially with the porta power. And so I've used them quite a bit. Yeah, a slide hammer from Harbor Freight was useful for a few things, but actually not as useful as I thought it was going to be. So anyway, I'll come back when I have my next step set up. So my next step is to, I got this mounted on my head here. I need to punch out the bearing cup on the inside of this axle tube. And what I found has been really useful for that is this nice little Harbor Freight breaker bar. I bought this for 12 bucks. It'll be useful as a breaker bar, but what's nice about it is it has this nice sharp 90-degree edge right here. And this has proven to be very useful in driving out that inner bearing cup. I want to put this back on my head and show you real quick here. So I use a sledgehammer. Slide it in. And there it went. Perfecto. I'm so happy to find this work, because I didn't know how I was going to do it if it wasn't this easy. So, didn't even mar it too bad. Sort of working on it around here, but shoot, if I had to buy one of these for every time I did a job, it wouldn't be a bad thing. Anyway, so now I'll set up the porta power inside and press out the outer cup using the puller or driver cup things over there from Harbor Freight. I said that I was going to try to press out the outer bearing cups with the porta power, but I realized I forgot to get the other sprocket out, or pressed out. So I basically took the cover, board behind it, pushed the other sprocket up front. I'm going to try to pry it out with the pry bar. We'll see if it works. So I loosen this up a little bit more, Stick the pry bar in again, push it out a little bit more. So I actually had to add a little barbell weight to the stack there to provide a little bit more spacing so I could get this pry bar in to drive it, and I just felt it move. So what you have, yeah, so you can hear it. So you have to keep loosening the bolt a little bit more and prying it more. So it should be easy to get out from here. So I'll come back in a second. Okay, that was a little harder than I thought it was going to be. That little hockey puck that you can buy from Harbor Freight that it's about inch, maybe 2 inches wide, and it's like a 10-ton, you know, I don't know what it's called, the ram. That's probably the best way to do it. I have one, but I was thinking of returning it to Harbor Freight without using it. I probably should have. It took me about 20 minutes to get it out. So anyway, got the hub pressed out, I mean the axle, and I just want to get this seal. It's a bad seal. I want to get this out, so I've been using this number, but usually I had the axle out, but it's so okay. So there's a bearing on the other side that's holding it up. I can just brute force it, I guess. Not sure what's okay. What has gone on here? Something went wrong here. So now I need to figure out. I think something's jammed in there. I'll figure this out in a second. So, sledgehammer, lifted it up, hit it back in. And so, probably 2 bearings on this that aren't coming out easy. So I really do need to kind of brute force it, since the bearing on the end didn't really come out. So I'm going to just crank it. And no wonder, because the bearing was messed up on the inside. And that's how you can get all of it out in one shot. These things are heavy. Alright, so that was the outer bearing, and it is a mess. The seal was always a mess. So there you have it. So I got those 2 out. Now I'll go back. Let's take a look at the rest here. Of course, all the little rollers are inside here, and look at that mess in here. It's just really bad. Ugh. So that's the, feel lots of little shards of metal. Things disintegrated. So I'm going to clean this up and then get to knocking out these cups. Okay, I'm going to drive out the other inner bearing cup like I did before. There you go. Okay, well, I've put the little driver in the tube, and I'm pulling the porta power through, and I'll hook this guy on the end section. It is a pain. Oh my goodness. Alright, well, a little oil never hurt anything. No, for some reason, something's stuck, and I may need to take out that little section. I thought I had it in last time, but I'll come back and drive it out, and there should be another, the bearings should be in here too. Alright, I'll be back in a second. So, you got the power in there, and I just hook it up as like this. Now the other way to do it would be to use that same puller and then hook it to a slide hammer. But I don't really have a slide hammer long enough. And so, now it's still doable, but I figure since I have the porta power, why not do it the fun way? So, here we go, I'll back out. And now it's pretty rusty, so I'm assuming though it'll come out, but it's possible that we may need to do more, like potentially heat. Apparently not. Now the question is, what broke there? Let me see. So yeah, so we broke, it started pushing it out, and it should come out easily now. Alright. So it's completely pressed out. And then we loosen it up, drag it back. Tighten it down. Oh, okay. That's the one thing with the porta power. I want to make sure you retract it. And then lock it down. So to be honest, as I was trying to get the outer bearing cup out from the other side with the porta power, I couldn't do it. I got it out on this side fine, but when I was doing the other side, it pressed out sideways. I don't know why. It might have been rusted really bad, but I could not get it out for the life of me. So I finally resorted to a big old pipe that is a, I just found in the backyard, a tetherball pipe, and I just whacked the heck out of it, and it finally came out. So you have to improvise. Good, big pipes are helpful. I put this guy in to drive it out, and it flew out with the bearing cup. So that's another way to do it. Whatever you gotta do, you gotta do. So I found a local machine shop where they have a big old press and they can press off the hub, or the axle from the hub. It's a lot simpler than removing the hub with a bottle jack. It's a little scary though. So I started out this morning putting the outer bearing cups in, and what I started out, all I did was take a hammer to get it into the I have this anti-seize in there, and that stuff gets all over your hands. But I put some anti-seize in there, and I just tapped it in and worked it around. Eventually it got far enough in that I was able to use, it was here a second ago, a slide hammer, here it is, with one of these punch or puller washers, I don't know what they're called, and I stuck that inside, and then I just hit it the rest of the way in. So it's pretty easy to push that all the way on, and so I have it on both sides, and the next step will be to put the inner bearing cups in, and I'm going to do it the same way. Well, I started on the inner race bearing cups, and I'm just working them around with the hammer, and started out a little crooked, but I was able to straighten it out, so should be done with these in a second. What kind of sucks, I found that my GoPro camera lens is scratched after going in here and doing some things. Must have touched it on something, but I just want to finish this up. So what I found is useful for pressing in the inner bearing cups is just taking some old bearings, put them in the new, cups on the outside, and the ones that are partially installed. And I just used an old floor jack handle, and I just put it all the way through, and I also, that's damaged, hit something. I just use tape, and I tape on the new driver right into place, and it's all lined up. So bottom line is, one good hit should push it through the and so it's not flush anymore, and so it'll push it deeper in, and so that way it's easier to align it and continue to drive it through. So I'm going to try that. Hopefully it'll work. It worked for the front, but I think I might have had somebody here helping me. I don't remember. I don't know if I already showed this part, but you have to press your outer bearings onto your axle shaft, and I've already lubed them up and everything, but the way I did it is, I guess, common. I bought a 2-inch pipe. Actually had this out in the yard, and cut it to about 3 feet. I'm going to use the rest of it for another project, so use that. It's just it matches the inside of the bearing. And I grabbed one of the old bearing I don't know what it's called, bearing race, from one that got really messed up, and I used that, which I had cut originally, and it has a break in it, so it slides on and off really easily over the axle. And then I used the pipe to just pound it on, so that worked really nicely. And so now those are ready to go in the axle tubes. So we're pretty close to finishing up, but of course you have to put the sprocket back on, and that really takes two people. So that will be the next thing we do. So I've put the axles in the axle tube. I put the seal, as you can see, on the, I've lubed it up, put the seal on. You can remove the key, or you can kind of hit it around and get it over the top, or you could actually put it on before you press the bearing on from the other side of the shaft. But got those in, and now, and I also put the other bearing on the other side. It's kind of very loose on there, and I need somebody else to push this in while I try to get the sprocket down there aligned to the splines. And once that's done, you just tighten the whole thing down, and it's done, at least for that side. So last night I left off trying to get the two sprockets in, and it was a real tough time, and I needed to have my wife come out and help, and I must have tried 50 different ways to do it. But what I ended up doing, I don't have it set up here, I straddled this bar across these tires. I ruined some bungee cords, and basically hooked them up around the axle, put the nut in so that it would hook on nicely, and then straddled the bungee cords across the breaker bar so that it would stay up, because it's hard trying to keep the bearing in place, pushing that in just enough but not too far so that you can then try to press the sprocket on. To press the sprocket on, you know, bottom line, I had to use blocks of wood. So I used this guy, I used a bunch of old boards, floorboards, just thin things that I actually started putting into place, and that would push against, creating a backboard for the sprocket, so that eventually when we could, because it's very hard to hold the sprocket in place and then have somebody try to feed it in, and so eventually if you got it basically in place and you couldn't push in too far to drop the bearing out of the cup, then you could eventually wiggle it around, and then it'd lock into place. And then at that point you could put your bolt in and then tighten it down. So that was a real pain in the rear. It took a while, but eventually got everything in place, tightened it all down, and that's pretty much it. At this point, all I have to do is put the hubs back on, put the keys in place, and tighten them down. Put the hubs on, tighten them down to whatever is hard. Put a big lever arm on there and do it as tight as I can, and that's it. So I don't know if this is going to be of any help, but like I said, I got some help from people on the internet, so I thought I'd do my part. So have fun.